Let's talk about some possible Dark Mechanicum teasers, some fun but very fake Warp Spider leaks, and some pretty expensive Warhammer releases. Hello and welcome back to Auspex Tactics, where today I thought I'd do a quick news roundup video, talking through a whole load of interesting little Warhammer news and release things that I thought were worth mentioning on the channel, but maybe didn't really need an entire video all to themselves. In this one I thought I'd talk about this rather intriguing Dark Mechanicus claw that does seem to have some resemblance to Men of Iron, a fun Eldari Warp Spiders leak that is rather unfortunately really quite fake, the pricing on that new Darktide box, the one with the Poxwalkers and Traitor Guardsmen facing off against the protagonists, and a roundup of all the other Warhammer news releases and miniature teasers. Diving straight into it, one of the things I certainly found the most interesting over the last week or so was this intriguing claw tease from the Rumour Engine. I certainly find those Rumour Engine teasers a bit hit and miss, some of them really could be anything, but every so often we're given something really quite specific that you could maybe get some hints from, and I think this is one of those times. You can see the grayscaled image here, it's basically an articulated claw, kind of two fingers opposed by one thumb there, if that's what you want to call them. The fingers closing to outside that thumb bit, in some scuffed casing with a couple of little barbs on the back of one of those claws that you can see. Obviously it could be any of Games Workshop's gaming systems, 40k Necromunda or Heresy out of the grimdark things, but usually when you see an entire weapon like this you can usually at least pin it down to the faction or army. This one's maybe a little bit less clear, though to me it certainly looks chaos. Those two little barbs there sort of look similar to the Chaos Knight War Dogs, as we'll mention. Plus, in general, the majority of the more Imperial type things tend to have their equipment in better condition than this. Looks like the casing is all scuffed and damaged. Could certainly be painted up a bit weathered like it's been in the Eye of Terror for a while. I must admit, as soon as I saw this, I thought about Men of Iron. I think I even wound up sending a comparison picture of this to the model that you can see now in around about 1 minute after this dropped on the Games Workshop website. I don't know if that's partly because I'm a bit over-fixated on them though. I certainly have made an entire video in the past talking about how it could be interesting to bring them back in some way to Warhammer 40k, and might even be kind of possible with Vashtor now being around and about and trying to tunnel his way into a big stock of weapons of some sort. Otherwise though, even if it is a Man of Iron, it could potentially be for Necromunda. They did have that Vault Door sort of teaser at the last thing that we had for them. If that's going to be a whole new setting for them and investigating some Archaeotech vaults beneath the city perhaps, I feel like discovering a bunker of decaying Men of Iron might not be the most unlikely thing in the world. If we are thinking tech heresy of some sort as well, I'd bear in mind that Mechanicum and 30k are also heavily hinted to have a release sometime soon. Certainly could be a claw for one of their automata. Just taking a closer look at that thing though, this is why I was thinking it looked kind of similar to the UR025 Man of Iron that's been in hiding in plain sight, dressed up as an Imperial Servitor. The articulation and the claw is just the exact same setup, and in particular that little hinge joint that joins the cowling to the claw looks really quite similar, as do the bits that you can see that are painted in a sort of metallic tone versus a sort of matte tone. It really does feel like we're just seeing that same sort of design but sculpted for a different model and made chaos. Not to say that it definitely is Men of Iron or anything like that, but to my mind it looks dead similar. Just for those little spiky bits at the back of it, I saw a couple of people likening it to the War Dog Slaughter Claw. You can see the sort of little raised barbs that has there. I'd perhaps say that the casing and stuff doesn't really look like the same as sort of Knight things. They tend to have that trim around the edges, whether it's Imperial or Chaos. Let me know what you think though. What flavour of Techno Heresy will that claw turn out to be? Next up, and maybe a slightly fun one, was this blurry potato can picture of some Eldari Warp Spiders floating around. Thanks to the Eldar Discord server for showing this one to me. Doing a little bit of searching, looks like it was around on Reddit as well, sometime last week as well, where people didn't really give it all that much credibility there either. The leak would be really quite fun if it were true. It shows what looks like some new Warp Spider miniatures, with some slightly different styling, with some big tall white helms, and then some dark plumes out the top, carrying Death Spinners, with the Exarch in the centre carrying two of them. At first glance I'd say it's at least medium convincing, though obviously it's hard to be sure what you're looking at given that it's shot in potato cam. That's clearly suspicious just because it obscures any fine details that might have been visible in dodgy edits or anything like that. But still, somehow in this age of smartphones, it still seems to be the way that we get quite a few leaks in Warhammer, several of which turn out to be genuine. It's hardly the most unlikely rumour in the world either. I'd say it's about as close to guaranteed that we'll get some new Warp Spiders with the next major Eldari release, whenever that happens to be. The sculpts are some of the oldest in Games Workshop's current range, at over 30 years old now. But personally I say that compared with a whole load of miniatures of that era, they have held up a fair bit better than most. Unfortunately though, as mentioned, if there are warp spiders in development at the moment, then these aren't them. It's perhaps kind of hard to say too much about the models themselves, but the background of the edit gives it away completely. The Eldari miniatures in their promo shots have them backing on to some twisted and ancient Eldar scenery. You can see a whole load of shadowy trees and Eldar architecture and webway gates out there. Each of the Eldari boxes has them in slightly different configurations. The backdrop's different between every single infantry kit pretty much, and this one does unfortunately look like it was just reused from the Dire Avengers box art, as you can see here. The trees and the terrain and the scenery and things are all in the exact same places, which as best I can tell they aren't for any of the others. For that reason, plus just dodgy potato cam leaks, I'm going to say creative fake. Though that said, seems kind of safe to bet that warp spiders will be coming in the not too distant future. It's more a question of whenever the next big Eldari release wave will happen. Next up, it looks like the Darktide miniature game pricing is kind of unfortunate. Apparently the pricing for the box game is going to be $110, which would mean around about £65 or €80 or so, which I think is safe to say is far more than what people were hoping for that, and probably going to be not something that most people are going to justify. Quite a lot of similar offerings for Games Workshop mini board games like this have tended to be a lot cheaper, like half the price of this or so. Though in all honesty I had a bit of an inkling of a suspicion when they revealed the miniatures for it. This one's a box set that's themed around the Darktide game. Unfortunately, no new sculpts in it, which a lot of people commented on the last video I did about it, saying that it was a missed opportunity. But if you added together the value of the miniatures, it did wind up being quite a bit. The Psycho miniature would be $35 alone. Ogrins are $60 for 3, so $20 each essentially. It turns out that the Traitor Guardsman miniatures are the 10 from the Blooded Kill Team box set, so the one that's usually with the Traitor Commissar and the Ogrin, but in this one you just get the Guardsman. So with a split between that box, maybe around about $35 or so for the Guard folks. Just in terms of miniatures that Games Workshop would sell elsewhere, that'd already add up to around about $90, then add in another 6 Poxwalkers, a Zealot character and Kazakin, and at least by Games Workshop pricing that'd probably make up a good part of the last $20 or so, never mind the actual printed board game bits with all the paper and the counters and things. Overall, at least from a pure miniatures point of view, I think that's unlikely to be seen as a good deal by just about anyone. Maybe it could be alright if you just wanted a whole collection of miniatures for a fun painting project. I guess if you say compared it to a 10 model Horde box set and 2 character miniatures, you would get more than that in here for a similar sort of price than GW Direct, but in general I can't really see this one having very much broad appeal. I probably should have guessed it would have been somewhere around this sort of price given the miniatures contained within. Would have been kind of fun though if all of these had been at a fairly hefty discount, could have had some appeal from people just wanting it for the miniatures rather than the overall game type thing. Sticking with things that are perhaps surprisingly expensive even by Games Workshop standards, the made-to-order metal Orks do look pricey. The other week they announced that 3 sets will be going made to order. They're all available on the Games Workshop web store now. All classic miniatures from days gone by and all sculpted in metal. There's 6 very old school commandos, 5 knobs including one with the War banner, and the old and stompy Ork Dreadnought with the power claw and saw. The commandos are £37 or $60, the knobs are £35 or $60, and the dreadnoughts a fairly whopping £45 or $75 there. Kind of crazy that that thing is significantly more expensive than the current Ork Death Dread. Even now you can't get it in the Combat Patrol discounted. I feel like you have to be seriously swayed by the nostalgia to pick them up at these prices personally. I guess that for once, for Games Workshop materials might actually be a genuine factor in that cost. Obviously I'm sure they're making massive profits on it and they've got a significant markup, but the price of pewter and metal has seriously skyrocketed in recent years, and I guess if they want to retain their similar extreme profit margins, it does mean that these guys might well be pricier than some of the plastic kits. Feels like the Ork Dreadnought in particular might be an example of that. I guess it is a fairly solid hunk of metal. Otherwise, for the Warhammer releases this week, it looks like it's largely going to be a week dedicated to Legions Imperialis, issue 500 of White Dwarf, and a few things for the Old World and Lord of the Rings. Legions Imperialis gets those Stormhammers, Malkadors, and Dracosan tanks for Solar Auxilia but small. The Space Marine Forces get Sikaran tanks, Dreadnought drop pods, and the Legion fast attack set that you can see pictured here. Feel like there's always a bit of a novelty to see each new thing but made small. The Javelin speeders, jet bikes, and the regular biker units do seem kind of fun. Otherwise, looks like the White Dwarf miniature for the 500th anniversary is £25 or $40, kind of in line with Games Workshop's normal character pricing there. Quite a cool miniature, this one going for an Age of Sigmar type scope. A whole bunch of vanquished Orc and Chaos bits lying at his feet. Otherwise, there's that 500th issue of White Dwarf, which has got a whole load of nostalgia things, and it's just a very big issue in general, at around about 200 pages. A bunch of old world made to order Orcs and Goblins, seeing as they're the most recent focus for them, including a bunch of things like some old Stone Trolls, and a launch for the Osgiliath modular ruins for Middle-earth, I believe making a return from back when Games Workshop did the Lord of the Rings range in earnest. Those should all be going live on the 4th of May, with full release out on the 18th of May. As always, if you did want to get discounts versus Games Workshop's prices and also support the channel, there are some discount retailers linked in the video description, and that could be one way to save a bit of money versus Games Workshop's releases if you were picking up something anyway. A big thank you to any of you folks who are using those ones. For cheaper miniatures, at least for some people with easy locations nearby, Games Workshop's free miniature of the month this month is Back to Age of Sigmar. This one's a Free Guild Steel Helm, which is one of their new Cities of Sigmar type range things. I must admit, out of the Sigmar ranges, I do find these guys really quite cool. Pretty fun and detailed, feudal men-at-arms with a bit of Warhammer weirdness thrown in. Quite nice recent sculpts for them, even if they're not quite as exciting as the Great Big Deathwing Knight that they had available for the April miniature. I guess the 40k applications could make some Crusaders for Cities of Battle, or could be far enough to convert some sort of men-at-arms to go alongside Imperial Knights maybe. In general, for these ones, I'd usually not really advise travelling much out of your way for this. It's more the sort of thing if you happen to have a Warhammer store within the same town or city, or one that you're passing through, could just be worth calling in. Supply of these can be a bit variable, some run out completely or just get no supply from Games Workshop, even if the majority might, and comments on other videos said that some stores have had different policies. Some are very lax about it and just treat it as a genuine freebie given out to people who call in. Some of them might make you build it in the store, or give you a bit of a hard time about it if you're not spending money on other things at the same time. All that depending though, and it could be worth a look in if it's convenient enough. Otherwise, sticking with the Mortal Realms, Games Workshop unveiled some new sculpts for the Prosecutors on Monday. I still do find it kind of wild that the Stormcast Eternal miniatures are getting a fairly radically redesigned new line, only less than 10 years after they came out in the first place. Admittedly, the original Prosecutors were maybe one of the miniatures that wasn't the easiest to transport and store and things. Dozens of really little slender shards of plastic that made up their stylized wings as they descend from the heavens. I'm sure there'll be a fair few collectors watching those who had them break on them at one time or another. Looks like the new ones are going for really quite a different aesthetic in general though. These chaps soar on wings of fire, it would seem. Fronds of flame issuing out from the more sort of stylized armoured wings that we might have seen before. Looks like a few of them on the preview article are armed with spears and shields and things like that. Looks like there's a few options for stylized helms, and they do seem to have lost the load-bearing parchment sort of thing that others were floating around on. We'll be interested to hear what you think of the miniature though. In general, I think they look pretty cool. Apparently there's an option for them to have this choice between either face masks or bare heads under helms. Otherwise, on the horizon for Warhammer 40k things, I guess the next big 40k release should be the Chaos Space Marine one. That's be the Combat Patrol, Codex, and the 2 Battle Forces. That one's billed for spring, though admittedly could be several weeks away at this point. And then further out on the horizon, we've got Kill Team Termination, the Votan vs Brood Brothers one. Will be quite nice to get an infiltrate type unit for the Space Dwarves. For some individual releases, we'll be looking out for Mandrakes, Night Lords, the Orc Big Meg, and the Custodian's Shield Captain. And when we get to summer, we know that there's 3 different codexes coming for 40k then, Genestealer Cults and Sisters of Battle. Should be some new character miniatures alongside those at least, maybe a bit more if either faction gets lucky, and a mystery codex that many are thinking might well be Agents of the Imperium, judging by those printing factory leaks. I guess we might also have the Hachette Partworks Combat Patrol magazine launch in the UK in the not too distant future as well. I believe that dropped sometime around August last time. In any case though, let me know what you think of the Games Workshop news and releases. Look forward to hearing your thoughts on the new models and the box and miniature pricing. And feel free to subscribe to Auspex Tactics if you'd like to see more like this. I do tend to post 40k related stuff just about every day. Finally, if you have been enjoying all the videos on the channel, I would just like to mention that Auspex Tactics does have a Patreon page as well, and you can find that linked in the video description if you'd like to help support and keep all of these coming. Channel patrons do get a fair few advantages, seeing certain videos early, regular votes to see what sort of things come next on the channel, and automatic entry into the regular prize giveaways with a chance to win some big model kits each month. If any of that sounds good to you or you'd just like to help support, The link is down in the video description. In any case, a massive thank you for listening, and I'll hope to see you guys next time.